The shrill sound of the alarm snapped me out of a deep, restless sleep. My eyes opened suddenly, focusing on the faded ceiling of my small apartment in Washington, D.C. For a moment, I was disoriented. The images of my dream, or was it a memory, still hovering on the periphery of my consciousness. I blinked several times, trying to clear away the fog of sleep and the disturbing visions that haunted me. My name is Daniel Roth, and until 6 months ago, I was a respected archaeologist and professor of ancient history at Georgetown University. Now, I'm a man on the run, pursued by forces I can barely understand, let alone explain. It all started with a discovery that should have been the pinnacle of my career, but which became the catalyst for my downfall. As I got out of bed, my eyes fell on the half-open suitcase in the corner of the room, reminding me that I couldn't stay in one place for too long. The walls of the apartment seemed to close in on me, echoing the feeling of claustrophobia that had been haunting me ever since I left my life behind. I walked over to the window and pulled the curtain aside slightly, watching the busy street below. People went about their normal lives, oblivious to the monumental secret that threatened to crumble everything we thought we knew about our history and our place in the universe. I turned to the makeshift table that occupied a large part of the small living space. On it, scattered in an organized disorder, were documents, photos, and artifacts, the evidence I had collected over the last few months. Each item told a part of the story, a story so fantastic and terrifying that I sometimes doubted my own sanity. I picked up one of the photos, a faded image of a clay tablet covered in cuneiform writing. It was this tablet, discovered during an excavation in southern Iraq, that started it all. At first glance, it seemed to be just another administrative record from ancient Sumer. But when I started translating the text, I realized I was looking at something much more significant. The tablet spoke of beings called Anunnaki, described not as mythological gods, but as visitors from another world who came to Earth millennia ago. According to the text, these beings not only interacted with primitive humans, but shaped them, ruled them, and eventually mixed with them, leaving an indelible mark on our species and our civilization. At first, I treated the discovery with academic skepticism. After all, myths of alien gods were nothing new in archaeology. But as I delved deeper into my research, I found more and more evidence that corroborated the story of the tablet. Artifacts with unexplained technology for their time, depictions of flying machines in ancient art, and even genetic anomalies in human remains that defied current scientific understanding. The more I discovered, the clearer it became that I wasn't just dealing with myths or legends. The Anunnaki were real, and their influence on Earth went far beyond what anyone could have imagined. But my excitement at the discovery soon gave way to fear. I realized that I wasn't the only one interested in this information. I began to notice strange looks in the university corridors. Mysterious emails appeared in my inbox, some offering exorbitant sums for my findings, others containing veiled threats. That's when I decided to share my findings with my colleague and mentor, Professor James Blackwood. I vividly remember that evening in his office, the book-lined walls bearing witness to our whispered conversation. His eyes widened as I revealed my findings, the initial incredulity giving way to a mixture of fascination and horror. "Daniel," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "do you realize what this means? If this is true, the entire history of mankind will have to be rewritten." I nodded gravely. "I know, James. That's why I need your help. This is bigger than any of us." He was silent for a moment, his eyes roaming over the photos and documents I had spread out on his desk. Finally, he spoke, his voice carrying a seriousness I had rarely witnessed. "Daniel, you need to be very careful. There are people, powerful organizations, who will do anything to keep this information secret. You're not just dealing with the Academy here, but with forces that shape the very world we live in." His words sent a shiver down my spine, but I was already too involved to back down. In the days that followed, we worked tirelessly, gathering more evidence, connecting the dots of a conspiracy that stretched back millennia. But then, one fateful night, everything changed. I returned to my office at the university to find it ransacked, my files rummaged through, my computer gone. Panic set in when I realized it wasn't a simple theft. Someone was after my findings. I rushed to James' Huaon house, my heart hammering in my chest. When I arrived, I found the front door ajar. The interior was dark and silent. I called out to him, my voice echoing through the empty house. That's when I saw the dark stain on the living room carpet, a stain I recognized with growing horror as blood. At that moment, I knew that my life as I knew it was over. James was gone, probably dead, and I was the next target. I took what I could and ran, leaving behind my career, my friends, my identity. Since then, I've been living in the shadows, moving from city to city, always one step ahead of my pursuers. Every day is a struggle to survive and to continue my research. Because now, more than ever, I am determined to reveal the truth. The truth about the Anunnaki, about our true origin, about the secrets that have been hidden from us for so long. It's a truth that could change everything, that could shake the very foundations of our society. And it's a truth I'm willing to risk everything for. As I look out of the window again, I see the sun beginning to set, painting the Washington sky in shades of orange and red. I know I can't stay here much longer. Soon, I'll have to move again, continue my tireless search for the truth. But before I leave, I need to document everything I've discovered so far. This story, my story, needs to be told, because if something happens to me, if they catch me, the world needs to know. The world needs to know about the Anunnaki, about how they dominated the Earth for millennia, and about how their influence still shapes our world today. And so, with the weight of forbidden knowledge on my shoulders, I begin to write, knowing that every word may be my last, but determined to reveal the truth no matter the cost. Night fell over Washington, D.C., enveloping the city in a blanket of darkness that seemed to reflect my state of mind. Sitting at the makeshift desk in my temporary apartment, I typed furiously on the laptop I had bought with cash, trying to record every detail of my findings before I was forced to move again. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment as I wondered where to start. How to explain something so vast, so incomprehensible, that challenged everything we thought we knew about our own history. I decided to start at the beginning, or at least what I believed to be the beginning. The Sumerian tablet I found in Iraq was not just an isolated record. As I delved deeper, I discovered similar references in ancient texts from all over the world: Egypt, India, Central America. They all spoke of divine beings who came from the sky, bringing knowledge and technology, ruling for eons before mysteriously disappearing. But the Anunnaki were not gods. They were interstellar travelers, explorers from distant worlds who found a temporary home on Earth. According to the texts I translated, they came from a planet called Nibiru, a world that orbited our sun in a cycle of thousands of Earth years. As I typed, memories of my discoveries came flooding back. I remembered the thrill I felt when I deciphered the symbols in a remote cave in Peru. Symbols that described flying machines and weapons of unknown energy. Or the moment I realized that the ancient legends about blood of the gods were actually references to large-scale genetic manipulation. The Anunnaki, according to my findings, didn't just interact with primitive humans, they created us. Or rather, they improved us. Using their advanced knowledge of genetics, they took existing hominids and transformed them, accelerating our evolution to create a race of workers and servants. But why? What would motivate such an advanced race to come to a primitive planet and create a new species? The answer, I discovered, was as simple as it was shocking: resources. Earth possessed something the Anunnaki desperately needed: gold. It wasn't gold as a symbol of wealth that interested them, but its unique properties. In their texts, they spoke of gold as essential to the survival of their homeworld. They used it in some way to protect the atmosphere of Nibiru, although the exact details of this technology still eluded me. As I continued to write, I felt a shiver run down my spine. The implications of what I had discovered were enormous. We were not the apex of evolution, the result of millions of years of natural selection. We were the product of alien genetic engineering, created for a specific purpose. But there was more. As the millennia passed, something unexpected happened. Some of the Anunnaki began to see humans not just as servants, but as beings worthy of respect and even love. I've found records of unions between Anunnaki and humans, giving rise to a lineage of hybrids, the demigods of ancient legends. It was at this point that things got really interesting and dangerous, because these hybrids, with their enhanced intelligence and extended longevity, didn't disappear over time. They mixed with the human population, passing their genes on from generation to generation. And then, a bold theory began to form in my mind. What if some of these descendants of the Anunnaki were still among us today? What if they held positions of power, secretly guiding the course of human history? That's when I began to notice patterns in history. Powerful families that seemed to maintain their influence for centuries, technological advances that seemed to come out of nowhere, political decisions that defied conventional logic. It all began to make terrible sense. My fingers froze on the keyboard. The room suddenly seemed too small, the shadows in the corners too deep. For the first time, I fully understood the danger I was in. I wasn't just defying accepted history, I was threatening to expose a secret held for millennia. A secret protected by those with the power to shape the world itself. A sudden sound made me jump. It took me a moment to realize it was just a car passing on the street outside, but the moment of panic was enough to remind me of the need for caution. I saved my work and closed my laptop, carefully storing it in my backpack along with the other crucial documents. I couldn't risk leaving anything behind. As I prepared for another night of restless sleep, I couldn't help thinking about James. Where would he be now? Was he alive? Or had he become yet another victim in the long history of suppressing the truth? Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I felt the weight of all this knowledge pressing down on my chest. The truth about our origin, about our place in the universe, was both wonderful and terrible. And now that truth was in my hands. I closed my eyes, knowing that sleep would be elusive. Tomorrow would be another day of escape, of searching, of trying to put together more pieces of this cosmic puzzle. But as I took deep breaths, trying to calm my agitated mind, a certainty solidified in my heart. No matter the cost, no matter the danger, I was going to expose the truth about the Anunnaki. The world needed to know, and I was willing to risk everything to make sure that happened. With that thought, I sank into an uneasy sleep, populated by dreams of alien gods and secrets buried in the sands of time. Dawn found me wide awake, my eyes stinging from lack of proper sleep. I got up from the makeshift bed, feeling every muscle in my body protest. Days on the run and nights of frantic research were taking their toll, but I couldn't stop now. Not when I was so close to a discovery that could change everything. As I prepared a strong coffee, my mind wandered to the information I had received the night before. An encrypted email sent by an anonymous source promised concrete evidence of the continued presence of the Anunnaki in our society. The meeting place, the National Museum of Natural History, at 2 p.m. It was risky. I knew that. It could be a trap, an attempt to capture or silence me. But the possibility of obtaining tangible evidence was too tempting to ignore. After weeks of chasing shadows and deciphering ancient texts, the chance of having something concrete in my hands was irresistible. I spent the morning going over my notes, trying to connect the dots between the ancient Sumerian legends and the events of modern history. The theory that was forming in my mind was as bold as it was disturbing. What if the Anunnaki had never really left? What if, instead, they had integrated themselves into human society, guiding our development in subtle and not-so-subtle ways? I thought about the great dynasties of the ancient world, the empires that rose and fell, the scientific and technological revolutions that transformed our society. How many of these events were really ours? How many were orchestrated or influenced by beings with knowledge and abilities beyond our comprehension? At 1:30 p.m. I emerged from my hiding place, my heart racing with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The National Museum of Natural History was packed with tourists, families, and school groups. the perfect setting for a clandestine meeting. I wandered through the exhibits, my eyes constantly scanning the crowd. Every unfamiliar face was a potential threat. Every glance in my direction made my pulse quicken. At 2 p.m. sharp, I stopped in front of a display case containing Sumerian artifacts, ironically appropriate for the occasion. Fascinating, isn't it? A soft voice spoke next to me, making me jump. I turned to see a middle-aged woman, grey hair tied up in an elegant bun, piercing blue eyes studying me with unsettling intensity. "The Sumerians," she continued, as if we were in the middle of a casual conversation. "So advanced for their time. It makes you wonder where all that knowledge came from." I swallowed, recognizing the words as the password that had been included in the email. Maybe they had. "Help," I replied, completing the code. An enigmatic smile curved the woman's lips. "Dr. Roth, I presume? I'm Dr. Elena Valdez. We have a lot to discuss, but not here. Please follow me." I hesitated for a moment, years of academic training telling me to be cautious, to question, but the urgency in her eyes and the promise of answers pushed me to follow her. She led me through the museum's less busy corridors until we came to a door marked "Staff Only." With an access card, she opened the door and ushered me into a small office filled with books and artifacts. "We don't have much time," said Elena, locking the door behind us. "They know you're close to the truth, Dr. Roth. They're getting desperate." "Who are they?" I asked, my voice firmer than I felt. "The Guardians," she replied, her eyes sweeping the room as if she feared being overheard. "The direct descendants of the Anunnaki, those charged with keeping the secret and guiding humanity." My heart raced. It was confirmation of my boldest theories, coming from someone who seemed to have access to inside information. "Are you one of them?" I asked, unable to hide the mixture of fascination and apprehension in my voice. Elena shook her head. "Not directly. I'm what you might call a dissident. I believe the time has come for the truth to come out." She moved to a bookcase and, with a practiced movement, activated a hidden mechanism. The bookcase slid aside, revealing a safe built into the wall. With nimble fingers, she typed in a combination and opened the safe. "This," she said, taking out a cloth-wrapped object, "is what you're looking for." She carefully unwrapped the object, revealing what appeared to be an ancient clay tablet covered in cuneiform writing. But there was something different about this tablet. Embedded in the clay were tiny crystals that glowed with a light of their own, pulsing gently. "It's a key," Elena explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "A key to access the knowledge left by the Anunnaki. It contains coordinates to a location, a repository of technology and information beyond our current comprehension." I reached out shakily, hardly believing what I was seeing. Years of research, tireless searching, and here it was. Tangible proof, a direct link to our alien creators. But before I could touch the tablet, a deafening crash shook the room. The door burst inwards, splinters of wood flying through the air. Figures dressed in black burst into the office, weapons in hand. "Run!" shouted Elena, shoving the sign in my hands. She turned to face the invaders, shouting for me to run. Chaos erupted around me. I grabbed the sign and ran for the back exit that Elena had shown me moments before. Sounds of fighting and shouting echoed behind me as I ran through the museum's service corridors, my heart hammering in my chest. I emerged onto a side street, the cool Washington air hitting my face like a slap. I didn't dare look back, running as fast as I could, the precious sign pressed against my chest. As I blended into the crowd on the busy streets, my mind spun. What had happened to Elena? Who were those men? And most importantly, what exactly was I holding in my hands? One thing was certain. There was no turning back. I was in the middle of something much bigger than I had ever imagined, with powerful forces determined to stop me. But now, with this key in my possession, I was closer than ever to revealing the truth about our alien creators. As I moved quickly through the streets of Washington, mingling with tourists and locals, I made a silent promise. No matter the cost, no matter the danger, I would go all the way. The truth about the Anunnaki, about our own origin, had to be revealed. and I was perhaps the only person in the world capable of doing so. The streets of Washington passed by in a blur as I ran, my heart beating so hard that I could hear it echoing in my ears. The sign pressed against my chest seemed to burn through my shirt, a constant reminder of the weight of the knowledge I now carried. After what seemed like hours of frantic running, zigzagging through alleyways and mingling with crowds, I finally allowed myself to slow down. I found a busy cafe and hid in a dark corner, ordering a coffee with trembling hands so as not to look suspicious. While waiting for my drink, I allowed myself to examine the sign more closely. The cuneiform symbols were familiar, reminiscent of those I had studied for years. But there was something else, something that made my blood run cold. Interwoven with the ancient Sumerian characters were patterns I had never seen before, lines and circles that seemed to pulsate with a light of their own, almost as if they were alive. I took out my notebook and began sketching the symbols, my mind working frantically to decipher their meaning. The hours passed unnoticed as I delved deeper and deeper into the mystery of the tablet. It was only when the barista came to inform me that the cafe was closing that I realized how much time had passed. The sky outside was dark, and the streets, once crowded, were now almost deserted. With a jolt of panic, I realized that I had been vulnerable for too long. I quickly gathered my things and went out into the night, my eyes constantly scanning the shadows for threats. I found a cheap hotel on the outskirts of town and registered under a false name. In the relative sanctuary of the hotel room, I spread my notes out on the bed and went back to work deciphering the tablet. As the hours of dawn progressed, patterns began to emerge. The alien symbols weren't just decorative, they were a kind of code, interwoven with the Sumerian text. And as I decoded more and more, an image began to form in my mind, coordinates. The sign contained precise coordinates, pointing to a location deep in the Amazon rainforest. But there was more. Fragments of information about technology beyond our current comprehension. References to something called the genetic matrix, which seemed to be the key to understanding the true nature of the Anunnaki intervention in our evolution. My mind was spinning with the implications. If I could get to this place, if I could access this repository of alien knowledge, the possibilities were endless. We could finally understand our true origin, our true potential. But then a dark thought crossed my mind. If this information fell into the wrong hands, into the hands of the guardians Elena had mentioned, the consequences could be catastrophic. They could use this knowledge to consolidate their power, to subjugate humanity even further. A sudden sound made me jump. It took me a moment to realize that it was my own cell phone vibrating. With my heart in my throat, I looked at the screen. It was a message from an unknown number. "They're coming. You have 10 minutes. Go to the roof. A friend will be waiting." My blood ran cold. How had they found me so quickly? There was no time to wonder. I threw my things in my backpack, grabbed the sign, and ran to the fire escape. As I climbed the steps 2 by 2, I heard the sound of doors being kicked in several floors below. Deep voices shouted orders, and the sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the stairwell. I burst onto the roof, the cold night air hitting my sweaty face. For a terrible moment, I thought the message had been a trap. The roof was empty, with no sign of the promised friend. And then I saw him. A helicopter appeared silently out of the darkness, hovering a few meters from the roof. The side door opened and a hooded figure held out his hand to me. There was no time to hesitate. The sounds of pursuit were getting closer. I ran towards the helicopter, grabbed the outstretched hand, and hoisted myself inside. As soon as I got inside, the helicopter quickly gained altitude. I looked down and saw figures dressed in black bursting onto the roof. Their guns pointed helplessly at us as we drove away into the night. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Roth," said a familiar voice. The hooded figure lowered his hood, revealing the face of Elena Valdez. She was bruised and with a bandage on her forehead, but alive. "Sorry for the drama, but we had to make sure you had the tablet before risking the rescue." My head was spinning with questions, but Elena held up her hand to silence me. "There will be time for explanations later. Right now, We need to concentrate on getting to safety. Have you deciphered the coordinates? I nodded, still out of breath. The Amazon. There's a place in the forest. Elena smiled, a glint of excitement in her eyes. Excellent. That's where we're heading. The Anunnaki repository awaits, Dr. Roth. And with it, the answers we seek and the dangers we fear. As the helicopter cut through the night, I looked out of the window at the lights of Washington disappearing into the distance. A mixture of fear and excitement coursed through my veins. I was about to embark on the most dangerous and important journey of my life. A journey that could reveal the truth about our origin, our purpose, and our future. The mystery of the Anunnaki was about to be unraveled, and I was at the center of it all. What secrets awaited us in the depths of the Amazon rainforest? What truths or horrors were we about to discover? With the tablet held in my hands and the hum of the helicopter in the background, I prepared myself for the next chapter of this incredible odyssey. The truth was within our grasp, and nothing could stop us now. The roar of the helicopter's engines diminished to a distant hum as we landed in a small clearing in the dense Amazon rainforest. The humid, heavy air immediately enveloped us as we exited the aircraft, charged with the sounds and smells of the jungle pulsing with life. Elena checked a device on her wrist, something that looked like a mixture of a GPS and an advanced computer. "We're about 5 kilometers from the point indicated by the coordinates," she said, her voice tense with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. "We'll have to continue on foot from here." As we prepared to walk, I couldn't help but question Elena about her apparent preparation for this mission. "How did you know about all this? Who are you really, Elena?" She paused, her eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made me swallow. "I'm like you, Daniel, a seeker of the truth. But unlike you, I was born into the inner circle. My family. Well, let's just say we have a lineage that goes directly back to the Anunnaki." My mind spun with this revelation. "So you're a hybrid?" "Yes," she added, a sad smile playing on her lips. "But I don't agree with the Guardians' methods or goals. I believe that humanity has the right to know its true heritage. With that bombshell in the air, we began our journey through the dense forest. Every step was a struggle against the lush vegetation, the oppressive heat, and the incessant insects. But the promise of what we might discover spurred us on. Hours passed, and the forest seemed to get denser and older as we went on. The trees here were gigantic, their trunks thicker than anything I had ever seen. And there was something else, something in the air that made my skin tingle with a strange energy. "Do you feel that?" I asked Elena, my voice little more than a whisper. She nodded, her eyes scanning the room. "We're close. The repository emits an energy field that interferes with most electronic equipment. That's why it's never been detected by satellites or previous expeditions." Finally, we came to a clearing that seemed to have been torn out of the forest by some colossal force. In the center, partially covered by vines and moss, was a black stone monolith that stood at least 30 meters high. "This can't be natural," I muttered, cautiously approaching the structure. Elena was already examining the base of the monolith, her fingers tracing familiar symbols. "It isn't. This was built by the Anunnaki, tens of thousands of years ago. It's the entrance to the repository." I joined her, my heart racing as I recognized some of the symbols on the tablet. We worked together, our minds united in an effort to decipher the opening mechanism. That's when we heard the sound of branches breaking in the forest around us. Elena froze, her eyes widening in fear. "They've found us," she whispered. Before we could react, figures dressed in black emerged from the forest, guns pointed at us. In front of them stood a tall, imposing man, his blue eyes glowing with an unearthly intensity. "Well, well," he said, his voice resonating with a power that made my bones vibrate. "Elena, my dear, did you really think you could fool us?" Elena stood protectively in front of me. "Father," she said, her voice heavy with emotion, "please don't do this. Humanity deserves to know the truth." The man, Elena's father, laughed, the sound echoing across the clearing in a way that seemed unnatural. "The truth? They're not ready for the truth, child. They never have been." He turned to me, his eyes piercing me like lasers. "Dr. Roth, you have no idea what you're about to unleash. The knowledge contained in this repository isn't just dangerous, it's apocalyptic." My mind raced, trying to process it all. Elena's father was clearly one of the Guardians, perhaps even a direct descendant of the Anunnaki. And now, we were about to open a repository of knowledge that could change the course of human history. It was at that moment that something unexpected happened. The monolith began to vibrate, emitting a low hum that grew in intensity with every second. Lines of blue light began to run across its surface, forming complex patterns that seemed alive. We all stepped back, surprised. Elena's father cursed in a language I didn't recognize, his eyes wide with fear. "It can't be. The defense system shouldn't activate itself." The light from the monolith became more intense, blinding us momentarily. When I could see again, I realized with astonishment that an opening had formed at the base of the structure. Elena grabbed my arm. "Daniel, we have to go in. Now!" I didn't have time to think. In a moment of impulsive decision, we ran towards the opening, the sound of gunfire echoing behind us. We plunged into the darkness of the monolith, the opening closing behind us with a final bang. For a moment, we stood in total darkness, our hearts beating frantically. Then lights began to come on around us, revealing a corridor that seemed to stretch on endlessly. The walls were covered in symbols and diagrams that glowed softly, pulsing with life and knowledge. Elena and I looked at each other, the magnitude of the moment hitting us hard. We were inside the Anunnaki repository, about to discover secrets that had been hidden from humanity for millennia. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Elena took my hand, her eyes shining with determination. "Now, Daniel, we've discovered the truth. All of it. No matter how terrible or wonderful it may be." And so, hand in hand, we began our journey through the corridors of Anunnaki knowledge, each step taking us deeper into the heart of the secrets that shaped our species and our world. What would we find in the depths of this alien repository? What truths awaited us? And most importantly, were we prepared to face the consequences of our discovery? As we made our way through the illuminated corridor, I knew we were about to cross a point of no return. The fate of humanity was in our hands, and the weight of this responsibility was both terrifying and electrifying. Our real journey was just beginning. The corridor seemed to stretch on endlessly, its walls pulsing with luminous symbols that told the story of our creation and evolution. Elena and I moved forward slowly, our eyes wide at the magnitude of what we were witnessing. "It's incredible," I whispered, my fingers lightly tracing the symbols on the wall. "The entire history of humanity, no, of the universe, is here." Elena nodded, her face a mixture of reverence and concern. "Daniel, we need to be careful. The knowledge here may be too much for us to absorb in one go." We continued our journey, the corridors gradually opening up into a vast circular chamber. In the center, a crystal pedestal emitted a bluish light, projecting three-dimensional holograms that danced in the air around us. We cautiously approached the pedestal. As soon as we got close, the holograms solidified into recognizable images: galaxies, solar systems, and finally, our own planet Earth. An ethereal voice filled the chamber, speaking in a language I'd never heard before but somehow managed to understand perfectly. "Welcome, children of Nibiru and Earth," the voice said. "You have arrived at the Nexus, the repository of all Anunnaki knowledge. What you will learn here will forever change your understanding of the universe and your place in it." The images began to move quickly, telling a visual story that left me breathless. I saw the Anunnaki arriving on Earth hundreds of thousands of years ago. I saw them manipulating the genetic code of the first hominids to create Homo sapiens. "We came in search of resources," the voice continued, "but we found potential. You humans were our greatest creation and our greatest mistake." The images changed, showing conflicts between the Anunnaki, heated debates about the future of humanity. I saw some defending our freedom, others arguing that we should remain as servants. "The decision to leave was difficult," the voice explained. "Some of us stayed, blending in with the human population, becoming the guardians of our legacy. Others returned to Nibiru, vowing never to interfere again. Elena grabbed my arm, her eyes wide with shock. "Daniel, do you understand what this means? All our history, all our religions and myths, everything is based on the truth of the Anunnaki." I nodded, my mind spinning with the implications. But why keep it a secret? Why did the Guardians fight so hard to hide the truth? As if answering my question, the hologram changed again. This time, it showed a vision of the future, a future where humanity had mastered Anunnaki technology. "Knowledge is power," the voice warned. "And with great power comes great responsibility." The Guardians feared that if humanity discovered the whole truth too soon, it would lead to its own destruction. The images were terrifying. Wars using advanced technology, rampant genetic manipulation, the very fabric of reality being torn apart by reckless experiments. "But now," the voice continued, "you are here. The fact that you have reached the nexus means that you are ready for the truth. The choice is now yours." The hologram solidified into a sphere of pulsating energy. "This is the complete knowledge of the Anunnaki. With it, you can raise humanity to unimaginable heights or condemn it to destruction." Elena and I looked at each other, the weight of the decision bearing down on us. At that moment, we heard the sound of approaching footsteps. The Guardians had found a way in. "Quickly," Elena said, "we have to decide. Do we take the knowledge or destroy it?" My heart beat frantically as I weighed up the options. My whole scientific being was screaming to grab the knowledge, to finally have all the answers I'd always sought. But the rational part of me understood the danger this posed. "We can't let it fall into the wrong hands," I finally said, "but we can't destroy it completely either. Humanity deserves to know the truth, but maybe not all at once." With the voices of the Guardians getting closer, I made a decision. I reached out and touched the energy sphere. Immediately, I felt a flow of information invading my mind, not all the knowledge, but enough to understand, to guide humanity slowly towards the truth. The sphere glowed brightly and then dissipated, its contents now dispersed and encoded in my own and Elena's consciousness. At that moment, the Guardians burst into the chamber, led by Elena's father. They stopped, shocked to see the empty pedestal. "It is done," I said, my voice carrying a new authority that I had never felt before. "The knowledge is safe, but it will not be hidden. Humanity will learn the truth, but at its own pace, when it is ready." Elena's father stared at me, a mixture of anger and respect in his eyes. "You have no idea what you've done," he said. "On the contrary," Elena replied, standing next to me. "We know exactly what we've done. We gave humanity a chance to shape its own destiny." In the days and weeks that followed, Elena and I worked tirelessly to document what we had learned. We published articles, gave talks, always revealing just enough to instigate curiosity and critical thinking, never enough to cause panic or conflict. The Guardians, realizing that they could no longer hide the whole truth, chose to work with us, helping to guide the dissemination of knowledge in a responsible way. As I write these final words, I look out of my office window at the university. Yes, I've been reinstated with honors, and see a world that is slowly awakening to its true cosmic heritage. There are challenges ahead, to be sure, but there is also hope. The truth about the Anunnaki, about our own origin, is not the end of human history. It's just the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter that we will write together, as a united species, finally aware of its place in the vast cosmos. And what about me? Well, my search for the truth may have come to an end, but my journey is far from over. There are so many stars out there, so many mysteries yet to be unraveled. And who knows? Maybe one day, we, the children of Earth and Nibiru, will meet again with our creators among the stars. Until then, I will continue to do what I have always done. Seek the truth, wherever it may lead me. Because now I know, with absolute certainty, that the truth is not just stranger than fiction. It is more wonderful, more terrible, and more important than we could ever have imagined. And it's ours, all ours.